All right, good afternoon and welcome to this week's Iowa Learning Farms Conservation Webinar. I'm Matt Helmers with Iowa State University and the Iowa Nutrient Research Center, and I get the great pleasure to help with hosting many of these webinars. And so I'm back here today again, and it's a great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, a man that needs no introduction in Iowa, but I will still give him a short introduction. Dr. Keith Schilling, that is the state geologist and director of the Iowa Geological Survey, works at the University of Iowa and has had many important contributions to water quality research throughout the state of Iowa in many different aspects. And he's here today to talk to us about contribution of Streambanks to phosphorus export in Iowa, an area of research that is gaining better understanding in large part to Dr. Schilling's work and work of others that he has worked with here in the state of Iowa. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Schilling. And again, if you have questions, feel free to type those in the chat box, and we will get those to Dr. Schilling when he's done with his talk. With that, Keith, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Matt. My pleasure to be here, and it's my pleasure to present this work, which is really the definition of collaborative research in Iowa. I'm on the title slide, but honestly, there was a cast of dozens probably that contributed to this. So I'm looking forward to sharing the information with you. Or as I alluded to, yes, there are many co-authors and funding sources I want to acknowledge right away. First, the funding. Funding was provided for this study by two sources: the Iowa DOT and the Iowa Nutrient Research Center. The Iowa DOT was the work funded with collaborators Chris Wilson and Thanos Papanikolaou at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And our primary job there was looking at stream bank erosion with respect to bridge stability. So with this first round of funding, we were trying to map where all the stream bank erosion could be occurring in the state and relating that to bridge crossings and so forth. So that was part one. Part two was funded by Iowa Nutrient Research Center in 2017, and that involved trying to take some of this location information of where stream bank erosion could be occurring and then relating that to phosphorus export. And so that was an extension of the original work. You can see the co-authors here, Calvin Walter and Jason Palmer from Iowa DNR, Matthew Streeter from my shop, Tom Eisenhart, Iowa State, John Kovar, and so forth. So honestly, there is a big group here that contributed to this study. Well, motivation. Well, the first, the need for this study really arose. It's been around for a long time. The Iowa Nutrient Research Reduction Strategy did a great job predicting where phosphorus export may be occurring, and then also looking at load reductions associated with various practices. But this strategy focused primarily on sediment particulate phosphorus transport eroded from hill slopes. So it really was geared towards sheet and rill erosion from hill slopes, and explicitly stated that the strategy does not include stream bank sources of P, despite work done by Iowa State and myself and others that shows that they are potentially a large source of stream sediment. So there's always been this gap in the Iowa nutrient reduction strategy centered around how much do stream banks contribute to phosphorus export. So with that in mind, again, and how we laid out this project over the span of several years, we really had 5 main goals. And the goals here, or the objectives, are really in a very organized, progressive strategy about how best to understand this question, quantify the total phosphorus loads in Iowa's rivers, and estimate the stream bank contribution. So it's really a process. You're not just going to go somewhere and at one study site and figure this out. So to meet this objective, we ask these questions like, how much total phosphorus is actually exported from Iowa? Okay, question one. How much stream bank erosion is occurring? From that, we need to know something about what is the average recession rate? How much are they eroding across Iowa? What are the phosphorus concentrations in stream bank sediments? And then finally, we can add it all up in a very simple equation and look at the contribution. So I'm going to work through this material kind of one question at a time, and we'll answer those. And at the end, we'll come up with what we estimated the answer to be. How much phosphorus is exported from Iowa? Well, we've had some understanding of that in the past, but it hasn't been very comprehensive, and it's been kind of better than back of the envelope, but not a whole lot better. And so for this study, we looked at about 50 different ambient monitoring sites that the DNR has maintained over since '99 and 2000, and looked at the water monitoring data related and flow data from these sites, and used a couple of standard USGS load prediction methods called the LOADEST and WRTDS methods to estimate daily phosphorus loads from all these sites. And what we found, even, every one of these has some insights that come out as you're doing the work. What we found is that these two load estimation models that are kind of the industry standard, if you do this sort of work, really were very consistent when the loads were less than 2 kilograms per hectare. But when they got more than that, the LOADEST just went crazy and predicted some astronomically high values of phosphorus export. So for our work, we used the WRTDS method to estimate stream phosphorus loads in Iowa. All this work was summarized in a research paper I should have highlighted here, published in the Journal of Hydrology. And please contact me if you want that paper. Some insights from that work. There go to the next one. As you could see from all these different monitoring sites that phosphorus yields in terms of export per area varied quite a bit in Iowa. And for this work, I needed to make sure I highlighted the Des Moines low, where we see the landscape change considerably across the state in this recently glaciated flatter area compared to the Luss Hills in southern Iowa. So if you look at the top two red graphs, or red color ramping on there, you see the total phosphorus yield, the median and the mean, showing high values associated with southwest Iowa, Nishtabotnas, Nottoway, and so forth, Boyer. In that we have high relief and very erodible Luss soils there. So that, and then in northeast Iowa, we also have high relief. So phosphorus export or yields across the state are not uniform at all. In fact, they vary very considerably, and we see the highest yields in southwest and northeast Iowa. If you look at the statewide export, rather than looking at all 46 sites, we can look at just the sites that are leaving the state. Okay, so there are 16 of these basins that where the phosphorus and loads have been estimated are the locations where statewide phosphorus export is leaving to the Missouri or Mississippi River Basin. And that's the map on the right, just showing the average yields per those large basins. And you can see on the graph on the left how phosphorus export varies a lot every year. Okay, it varies with precip, how much rainfall runoff we get, and phosphorus export from the state can go from 5 to nearly 40 million kilograms, so metric tons. So phosphorus varies a lot, so we're going to take an average of that and have some idea of what the average phosphorus export is in Iowa, but know that it varies a lot. Part of this work I thought I'd just share because it was from Elliot Anderson, who is just a new recent PhD grad from IIHR and the University of Iowa. He did his work on phosphorus loading in Iowa. So a couple of these I thought would be interesting for folks to see. But from his work, he looked at these 16 major export rivers across the state. And we saw that the sediment part of phosphorus, the particulate P, makes up about 80% of the total phosphorus exports. And if you take out the Iowa, the Des Moines and the Iowa rivers that have large reservoirs that capture sediment, the ratio is really about 85%. So about 85% of the loads leaving the state are particulate P and not the dissolved ortho P. Another one of Elliot's slides here just shows the point source contributions. This was in the INRS, the strategy, and this has been updated with more recent work and I think better data, and shows that the average over about 20 years is that the phosphorus load, the export, is about 17% of it might be due to point source loads. You see on the graph on the right there how, again, this varies with wet and dry years. A dry year, the flows are lower. The point source is larger because it's a constant flow for the time period. Anyway, a couple of slides that just were interesting but got off our beaten path here a little bit. This is where the rubber meets the road for the bank erosion study. Iowa's total export. This was work done in my original paper from 2000 to 2017. Phosphorus yields in Iowa averaged about 1.7 kilograms per hectare. And this is about 3.5 times the average for the Mississippi River Basin. And on average, this is the number that I needed for my study here. Iowa exports about 25,000 metric tons of phosphorus every year. And we did previous work where we looked at Iowa's contribution to the Gulf of Mexico, nitrate concentrations or loads. From this work, we estimated that Iowa contributes about 15% of the total phosphorus to the Gulf of Mexico every year. Just a couple of things to keep in your back pocket if you want to share some phosphorus loading information with somebody. But the number we need is the 24,842 metric tons. The second question we looked at was how much stream bank erosion is occurring in Iowa. And this takes a lot of effort to map this physically, to walk stream miles, map where severe erosion is occurring. Impossible to do at the scale of a state. We've done it a little bit at the scale maybe of a Huck 12 or less. So Calvin Walter, GIS expert from Iowa DNR, came up with a strategy to look at our statewide LIDAR information to estimate where stream bank erosion could be occurring. Looking at bank angles in adjacent 1 meter LIDAR cells. And saying how if the angle gets to be a certain steepness, you have a pretty good indication that stream bank erosion is occurring in those cells. If you look in the C part on the left, on the right here, when it's a gradual slope, the change in slope on those banks, you don't see that steep bank angle, on the example to the right. And all this information, we developed a calibration relationship based on work that Jason Palmer did, mapping bank erosion in Lake Rathbun watershed. So they went out and mapped all these segments, and there's a whole range of stream bank heights out there. And from this relationship of mapping out in Lake Rathbun, we could develop this graph on the right that says, depending on how high your stream bank's high, what the bank angle would be to indicate where severe bank erosion was occurring. So we calibrated this curve based on mapping at Lake Rathbun. And so just in general, the idea is, again, just where bank angles are severe, that's where we're going to see widespread severe bank erosion. So from this information, it's pretty easy, I guess, at some level to scale up across the state because of the LIDAR information. We have good bank heights and good slope relations developed across the state. And the statewide map shows the locations of eroding banks in Iowa. Again, you see this, the more recently glaciated Des Moines lobe and Iowan surface and so forth, northern Iowa being a lot less severe bank erosion occurring there compared to the Luss Hills and the older glacial landscapes in southern Iowa. The image on the left is from Walnut Creek, location in south central Iowa outside of Des Moines, where the Neil Smith National Wildlife Refuge is located. Here we see where there was a pretty strong correlation between where we mapped it with LIDAR versus where we mapped it physically by walking the stream. So from this information right here, we can estimate how many stream banks or what the mileage of stream bank of severe erosion is occurring across the state. And that's what we've done here. Most of this mapping was done on stream orders from 3rd to 6th order. There was just too much vegetation cover at super small 1st and 2nd order streams. And honestly, where we looked, they weren't really eroding very much. So we focused on this 3rd to 6th order range of stream orders. And from this, across the state, we estimated there's 35,200 kilometers of stream banks of streams and rivers in Iowa that may be severely eroding, representing about 41% of all the stream miles. So that's a pretty, significant amount. I guess it's not a surprise if you've worked in streams at all to see how much stream bank erosion is occurring. And you can see in the table how the percent of the river miles in the basin increase in severe bank erosion as the size gets bigger. So bigger sizes, there's more stream power, more energy to start eroding banks and down cutting and making unstable banks. The statewide map in the upper right shows the meters of kilometers of square kilometers of a watershed area with severe bank erosion. And, kind of emphasizes what we saw on the previous map with the blue lines, just showing how more severe stream bank erosion is occurring in southern and western Iowa. And finally, the bank or the graph on the lower right shows the relationship between bank height, so how high is the stream banks in the stream channel, and the fraction of how much of that watershed that has severe bank erosion. And it just highlights again how as stream banks get higher and higher, the river's cutting down, there's just more potential and more mapped areas of severe bank erosion as the bank heights get steeper. Again, not a big surprise, but we have some sort of quantitative numbers that go along with that. So that was question number 2. Third question, okay, we know where the severe bank erosion is occurring, but how much are they receding? Okay, what's the erosion rate associated with the severe bank erosion? And from this, I really jumped on some long-term measured erosion pin sites done primarily from Iowa State University and Tom Eisenhart, Dick Schultz, and Billy Beck, who's in the stream channel there, and Jason Palmer. So we've been monitoring long-term erosion rates at various pin sites where you put a pin into a channel and you measure how much it recedes every year. Then I did kind of a meta-analysis on that to say what's the average of all the pins everywhere. And then also we looked at this kind of decadal scale color infrared aerial imagery to see how much the eroding banks might be observable from how streams migrate over 20 or 25 years. So for the erosion pin measurements, we've been out collecting this information in Walnut Creek since about 2005, when Jason Palmer started his master's thesis there. The graph there shows on the left how the pins have, what the erosion rate at these different pin sites have changed over the years. You see annual precip there and with the blue dots, it shows that as it as it wets up, we get more rainfall and stream discharge. Erosion at these pins increases and decreases during droughts. The box plots simply show the range in all the pin measurements at within 61 stream banks at the Walnut Creek watershed. So an amazing amount of effort over a long-term period. This is probably the among the rarest data available in this field in the world. This is really incredible information. So from here, the mean of all those pins in all years is 12.4 centimeters per year, a median about almost 11. The idea here, though, is that this is where severe bank erosion is occurring. This is not the mean for the entire river system. It's the mean where we have bare and exposed banks, okay? So we're focused only on where this severe erosion is occurring. So in another effort at this, Calvin was looking at stream channels in different stream orders and looking at the center line of the stream network between 1985 and another color infrared in 2010. And you can measure the change in the erosion that occurred, especially on outer bends, during about a 25-year period. And so we use this for the larger systems, okay? So Walnut Creek is a third and fourth order channel. Fifth and sixth order, we had to do something different because there's no pins being monitored on those big systems. So from this, I looked at a relationship between stream order and bank recession rate in centimeters per year. And that's what this graph is trying to capture. The red dots are where we use the aerial imagery to look at erosion rate based on changes in center lines of streams. And those X's, essentially, with the annual range of variation here at erosion at pin sites, captured this range. What was interesting, if you did a mean value of all these values, you could plot a very nice line here that shows, again, how you get greater bank erosion recession rates as streams get larger and larger. There's greater discharge in larger watershed areas and the increase in stream power. So for our study, though, what I really used, this was a expanded version of what I used. I really used the mean recession rate from the PIN studies in this effort because we didn't classify all the stream bank erosion by stream order. We were just taking a population as a whole. So I went with the average of the erosion rates using the pins. Question 4, what are the typical total phosphorus concentrations found in Iowa stream banks? So if you don't know, if you go to an Iowa stream bank that's exposed, you might see different units there of Holocene era alluvium. So at the lower limit, you might see this Gundar member alluvium. And, you know, as geologists, we like to name things and put time elements on them. So you see these different units that were deposited over different millennia. So 10,000 to 4,500 years might be the Gundar member. And then there's a very silty, organic rich Roberts Creek member that when prairie was really expanding across the state, was formed at 500 to 3,500 years ago. And the upper unit is the Camp Creek member, which is mainly the post-settlement material. So this is all the material that came down or overbank flooding in the last couple hundred years. So from this kind of general platform of stream bank alluvium, we sent out some teams to go measure and get stream bank samples at locations across the state, which is shown in the dots across the state map on the left. So at every one of these locations, we have 1, 2, 3, or 4 samples collected based on if it was what alluvial member or if it was slump material and undifferentiated. But stream bank samples were taken at all these eroding stream bank sites across the state. Mostly selected randomly, but within some public access parameters. So what we found was that there's a relatively narrow range of what total phosphorus concentrations are in these raw materials. They tend to be silt loams with a little bit of sand, perhaps at depth, but largely silt loams. You can see from the histogram how of all these values were plotted, they have a nice kind of normal distribution for the most part, centered around a mean of about 470 milligrams per kilogram. The range was up quite high in a couple samples, but there's something weird going on there, I'm sure. But overall, the mean we feel very happy with at 470. And what we didn't really see, as this histogram might indicate, a lot of variation based on stream order or even landform region across the state. So they fluctuated a little bit here and there, sure, but overall they centered on a pretty good mean value. Okay, so we are entering the home stretch here. What is the contribution of Streambank total phosphorus to Iowa's export? So here's the simple mass balance or math equation for you. You take the eroding bank length, objective 1 times the recession rate, times the total phosphorus concentration, the bulk density, and bank height, which I didn't share, but we got that from the bulk density from the Streambank samples and the bank height during the LIDAR work. We can estimate what this total Streambank load is. So there's the numbers. I'd mentioned 35,000 meters of eroding bank, 12.4 centimeters per year, 470 milligrams per kilogram. The average bank height across the state and all those stream orders was 3.2 meters. And that's the average bulk density. So we ended up with 7,681 metric tons. If you remember what the objective 1 was, what the total export was, 24,842. You divide the two, we get an estimated Streambank total phosphorus contribution of about 31%. So, but this varies a lot. Here's the deal: we have something that our phosphorus loads, as we saw in the graph, change all over the place. We have a one-time measurement of what Streambank contributions might be based on one LIDAR estimation. So we're really taking a constant times something that varies a lot. So this percentage can vary a lot if we take how Streambank phosphorus export might vary. So from in a wet year, Iowa exports a lot more phosphorus. Maybe the ratio is down to 11%. In a dry year, well, we're probably not eroding that much total Streambanks. But if we did, it would be more than what was exported from the watershed. So with that information, know how this is just a long-term estimate at this point. Here's a table from a paper that I'll share here in a little bit that we published in Journal of Soil and Water Conservation. And from this table, my goal here was just to share how much of these variations could depended on the assumptions that we used and what are the likely high and low values. And I don't want to walk through it all. It's all in the paper. But, for example, Streambank recession, we had 12.4 centimeters per year. Well, what if we used a low value at 2.4? Well, our total Streambank loss then would be 6%. During wet years, we erode a lot more. What if we used a high range? Well, all of a sudden it's 56%. So I want to stress that this is a long-term average, kind of a mean number for the state. So here's the example from eroding bank lengths. If we went plus or minus 25%, just by changing how many banks are eroding, everything else the same, we could go from 23% to 39%. So, and a couple more limitations. Again, this is what I mentioned. We used a static estimation of eroding bank length. It assumes no Streambank storage of phosphorus storage in the channel, all exported that year. And from Billy Beck's thesis at Iowa State University, the image on the right just shows that of the total sediment export over these 3 years, a large chunk, this bottom arrow, came from channel storage. So there's a lot of channel storage of sediment in our streams. And to do an estimate like this, we have to assume that all of it leaves. But that's what you get at with the long-term mean value. And this analysis at this point is not watershed or reach specific, but certainly could be. And I think more work could be targeted there to know how do these numbers might vary, especially in southwest Iowa compared to north central Iowa. So in conclusion, Iowa, like the nitrogen contribution, is a big contributor to loads to the Gulf of Mexico, contribute about 15% of the phosphorus loads there. We export about 25,000 metric tons of phosphorus per year. And the stream bank erosion contributions, if you want to take home general rule of thumb, just say it's about a third of the total annual phosphorus export from Iowa's rivers. We do have a new publication that has come out of the Journal of Soil and Water Conservation. And because of contribution from John Kovar at the ARS, we got it for free in public access. So anybody here can go to Journal of Soil and Water Conservation and download and read this publication. But for questions, please feel free to contact me today or anytime at that email at uiowa.edu.
Right, I'll jump in and do these. And actually, Ann Robinson sent it to me, and I put it in the link, or in the chat box, a link to the paper that Keith just referenced. So you should be able to go and find it there.
That was me.
Okay. Next, or first, CCAs. If you're on here and need a certified crop advisor, CCA. CEU, email Liz Ripley, jucums@iastate.edu by today at 5 p.m. with your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, if different, and your CCA, CPEG, so forth number. Again, by 5 o'clock today, jucums@iastate.edu. Next slide. Is okay. Next webinar, Land Core co-founders will be talking about value in soil health to de-risk adoption and develop incentives for producers through lending and insurance. So I think another interesting topic. I also want to put a little plug in. A new position was just posted with the Iowa Learning Farms and Water Rocks as a water quality educator. So please have a look at the Learning Farms blog. Social media information should have the link for that. It's on the ISU employment page, so you can apply there. It's going to be open a couple weeks. Please, if even if you're not interested, send that information to folks you think might be, because they'd like to get a good candidate pool for that. Okay, enough of me talking. There are some questions here. The first one, Keith, is, how do the stream bank pins work? Are they GPS points or physical pins in the stream bank?
Should I stop the share here and just?
Yeah, you can stop your share. Yep, that sounds great. Then we can see.
Yeah, great question. They're physical, so it's about as low tech as you get. So you might have a 2-foot long rebar. We pound it into the stream bank and keep a certain part exposed, and we keep track of how much of that is exposed. And if we come back later and there's more of it exposed, the difference between what we had in there originally as a standard exposed rebar versus with a new part, that's the erosion that occurs. And then we pound them back into that same standard again, and we can slowly use the same pins and track how much incremental erosion is occurring per pin. Now, what happens is that's a small area, and so you take a bank that might be 10 meters long or 5 meters long, and you might put in 50 different pins at that site. Okay. And so you'd measure all the pins, and that's why it gets to be very labor intensive to go out and measure the pins, annually, quarterly, after an event or whatever. So it's very low tech, but to be honest with you, we've done some recent work now looking at side scanning LiDAR where we have pins out, and on average, they give you about the same number. So for being low tech, they tend to get you in the ballpark.
The next question, what river data set did you use in the mapping of the highly eroded stream banks?
What river? It was this.
Okay.
It was the standard data set, part of the Iowa GIS library. So I don't think there was anything unique about that. And it was the statewide LiDAR and the processing that Calvin did with the bank angles to estimate where the severe bank erosion was.
This one, I think you kind of got it toward the end of your talk, but erosion is a natural process and highly variable. Did you look at deposition, knowing that not all eroded material is exported out of state?
That is that's a huge question, and yeah, I kind of hinted at that at the end, but the commenter is very, very correct to know that that's really like the holy grail question that we don't really know is stream banks slump off and are in a channel. How long are they there? How long does it take, even when they're mobile? How long does it take for that sediment to export from the state? We don't know that. We don't know that at all. In fact, that's a great follow-up question. And if there's any ideas on how best to even figure that out, let me know. But this is a natural process. Things take a long time to migrate through a stream network. So we make assumptions about banks immediately collapse, and that collapse relates to the sediment that was exported for that year, or the total phosphorus exported that year. Probably not right, but that's why I feel like there's at least some power in the fact that we have essentially a 20-year average. So maybe within that 20-year average, we're in the ballpark.
So I think that the next one is if you had the specific answer to this, Keith, you probably would make a lot. But just from your perspective, kind of what are the top practices for reducing that stream bank erosion? So we know it's a problem. You're right. Nutrient reduction strategy, science assessment kind of punted on that in a way. We know it's an issue. I guess what do you think we can do to kind of restore that or reduce that contribution into the future?
Yeah, there's probably two parts to that. One is that what we saw from this study and what we've seen in our own work and the literature is that it tends to be a stream power thing, in terms of how much bank erosion you're going to get. And so stream power relates to channel slopes. It relates to how much discharge is in the channel and things like that. And it's like, if we want to reduce bank erosion, we have to reduce stream power. Ultimately, that means reducing water flow, water discharge, and so forth. So that is not really probably the answer anybody's looking for, because that's going to take time to change the discharge. And there are practices that can be put on a stream bank to reduce or eliminate the erosion per bank, from natural biological revetments and revegetation to riprap. So it ranges all over the place. And what we struggle with a little bit is, what does that do for you? If you have a piece of property or a building you want to protect from stream bank erosion, by all means, look into stream bank protection where you have, some conditions that you need to protect. But overall, if you do one little piece here, in some ways, what you've done is just essentially change the problem and push the problem somewhere else, because that water wants to pick up sediment. It wants to erode. If you eliminate an option here, it might start eroding somewhere else. And so things are so connected in a stream channel it's a really a long-term challenging solution. Very unsatisfying. So I did not even come close to answering the answer.
You could say it's unsatisfying, but I think one of the things is it does get back at, the importance of what we're doing up in the landscape and the importance of trying to slow that water flow down as much as we can to reduce that stream power that we get into the stream. And that's probably, so yeah, maybe unsatisfying, but also illustrates the importance of all those upstream practices too, I think, in some ways. Okay, next one here. Would you say that the stream bank contribution to P loss is generally a higher percentage of P export from water in unglaciated areas or, longer ago glaciated areas than the more recent glaciated areas?
Yeah, I would say so. We have steeper banks. We have more eroding stream bank extent. Concentrations, we didn't see much different, but those two factors alone would say that we'd have greater stream bank contributions in western and southern Iowa. We could take some of our data and start playing around with that. You just start like understanding where the limitations are and what you're trying to say. And it seems like at some point you start drilling in too close and it's like, well, then there's some accuracy issues there at some point. So at a big scale, you can be a lot more confident. But I think at that level, just because the banks are higher and steeper and they're more eroding, we're going to get a greater contribution.
Here's one. Got to get this one in because this is kind of maybe at the talking about your geologic members. So was there a difference in P between the different geologic members of the bank?
In this study, we're still kind of assessing that, but I got to tell you, we did some work down at Neil Smith at Walnut Creek, and I specifically pulled out those members, and we did not see a significant difference in phosphorus. It tends to be so much dominated by elemental phosphorus. Well, I think if you did the P extractions, you might see differences, but as a total phosphorus, we did not. We have seen pretty sizable differences in nitrogen content between those alluvial members, with highest in the Overbank, Camp Creek, and then middle in Roberts Creek, and lowest in the Gunder. So we see that stratification in nitrogen. We have not seen it in phosphorus. But I think if we drilled in a little bit deeper and maybe some of the fractions, maybe we would see that.
Here's one is, do the eroding stream bank estimates include only contributions from severely eroding banks? If so, has there been any work on measuring or estimating contributions from moderately eroding banks?
Yeah, another great kind of insightful question, because we classified a lot of these banks by severely eroding by a kind of a qualitative scale, like you know it when you see it kind of thing. Like there's some metrics there of hanging roots and bare exposed banks, and we kind of know what ones look like that are not eroding because they're well vegetated and so forth. But there's a gray area between what is classified as severely eroding versus moderately eroding. Whether it's the lower part or maybe it's just a little isolated pieces here or there. We did not necessarily differentiate among those classes. So everything was considered, if it was mapped as severely eroding by our GIS model, it was considered that. So that's another room for further classification.
There was one here. Do you know of other areas of the Midwest, other states that are doing similar type of assessments? I guess is there enough data from your findings to link P-load in other areas in Iowa or the Midwest? And I might ask if there are others that are others doing similar work.
There are others doing the more of a site scale or maybe even a watershed scale. I'm not aware of anybody that's done it at this scale. So I think we've pioneered an idea and approach here with this work. I know it's been there's been a lot of interest in it across the state and what we did and so forth, but I don't think I know of anybody doing it at this scale. People have been measuring and understanding stream banks for a long time, but it tends to be very localized and site specific. And why is this bank eroding? And you understand the processes behind it. But this big spatial view, I think, is a pretty unique view across the Midwest.
I think I get this question, and I'm gonna interpret it because now it made me think of something. Has anybody looked at what might have been the estimated historical? I mean, our streams have meandered, and there's been stream bank erosion to some extent. So at least I would think some extent over time. Has anybody done historical estimates of that?
No, but we have a little bit. We could actually do it at back of the envelope on that, because if you look at a normal meandering stream, there's usually erosion on the cut bank and deposition on the point bar. But
yeah,
those cut banks are usually 20-25% of a stream length are severely eroding on a cut bank. So all of a sudden, we map 41% of our streams with the severe erosion, which is more than what a natural meandering stream would do. So we could adjust length based on that. We would bring the bank height way down, because I don't think our bank should be, 3 to 6 meters high. So we'd bring that way down. I think we could probably do a back of the envelope and saying, all right, now we're going to take our stream miles and say, 20% of our eroding naturally, bank heights here, phosphorus is the same, and see what we get.
Yeah, that somebody did say Minnesota and Wisconsin have done some TP studies from stream bank erosion, but mostly on the watershed scale.
Yeah.
They indicated, kind of for reference, there's a document called the Bank Erosion Potential Index that's used in Wisconsin to determine severity of bank erosion. Looks at different factors. If you're familiar with this, was something like this used, I guess. There was the question at the end.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it. We've used this the standard kind of visual NRCS criteria since I started doing some of this in 2000. So that criteria has been around a long time, and that's kind of the direction our state has gone. So myself and Iowa State and Eisenhart and Schultz and folks in NREM have done the same thing. We've just all kind of utilized that NRCS visual criteria.
All right, Keith, I think we got through most of the questions. And in the interest of time, we've taken a lot of your time today, and folks may need to, you may need to get onto something, likely do, others may as well. So I guess I'll leave it to you if you have any parting comments, but I want to thank everybody for attending today. Again, this will be archived on the Iowa Learning Farms website, so feel free to go back and watch that or forward that to somebody. And really appreciate Dr. Schilling taking time out of his schedule to present this really important work. Certainly from the Iowa Nutrient Research Center, it's been really important that this work be done, and it's great the collaboration that's been involved. With that, Keith, any last comments?
No, thank you so much for the opportunity. Reach out if there's individual questions, and thanks to ARS and making that publication free. So go download the publication and read more details.